Hello fans and friends across the universe, and welcome back to my YouTube channel from me to you. My name's Keir Smith, back today with another video and a list of Beatles regrets. As most of you know, I'm a huge fan of the Beatles and I'm so enamoured with everything that this band has to offer that it's often difficult for me to be critical of what feels like a perfect career. But there's an old Buddhist saying that says true perfection has to be imperfect, so it may be that the Beatles' career is imperfect. And so I was thinking about this topic and I found it interesting, but then I hit a bit of a brick wall. And so I put this to my good brother Liam, who is also a Beatles fanatic, and he helped to fill in the blanks for me. And so I've got a list of 10 things that I'd like to share with you now regarding the Beatles' career. Either things that I regret or things that I wish had been done a little differently. So my first comment is not so much a regret, more a wish, but I know that us Beatles fans love sharing these types of ideas. So for me, there's definitely a place for Some Other Guy on the Please Please Me album. I wish that had been included on that album. It's a great rock and roll song. And when you see the Beatles performing it, it's a great performance, and it's always puzzled me why that wasn't included on Please Please Me. And while we're on the subject, I think that Leave My Kitten Alone certainly could have been included on Beatles for Sale, and That Means a Lot, which I think is a really nice song with great drums, could have easily been included on Help. My second comment, and speaking of the Help album, it's always slightly irked me that Dizzy Miss Lizzy closes the album when finishing it Yesterday would have done very nicely indeed. After the subtle and poignant beauty of Yesterday, it feels like you've been given an electric shock for seemingly no reason for one last raucous rock and roller, and that's never felt quite right to me. The album should have finished with Yesterday. My third comment is, I wish we had more of Dig It from the Let It Be album. On the album it runs at 51 seconds, but I really enjoy it. But if you watch the original Let It Be film, you see the band working on it there, and Billy Preston's on keyboards, Paul's doing this deep vocal, if you want it, you can get it, and John's ad-libbing over the top. It sounds great. I always wish that had been fleshed out a little more and made longer. Admittedly, it's more than a bit loose and ragged, and certainly not as polished as a song should be if it's worthy of getting on a Beatles album, but we've got the snippet of it there, so why not? My fourth comment is a pretty obvious one, but I'm sure that I can speak for all Beatles fans when I say this. It is entirely regrettable that Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane, was kept off the UK #1 spot by Engelbert Bloody Humperdinck and that soppy old song, Please Release Me. As I say, that's pretty obvious, but maybe less obvious, but still an absolute travesty is that Let It Be was kept off the prime spot by Lee Marvin's Wandering Star. It's incredible, isn't it? Out of all of the Beatles' best songs and out of all of their great singles, those songs didn't make the #1 spot. You know, in 2002, there was a poll in the UK that voted Let It Be as the best song ever that didn't make the #1 spot. So, small consolation. Comment number 5, and another regret, and of course I wasn't around at the time, wasn't even thought of, but when the Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour film was aired on Boxing Day in 1967, it was shown in black and white. I mean, why? Why? Why would that be shown in black and white? There's more colour in that film than there is in one of those kids' bumper crayon sets. But no, it was drowned out by the BBC with this dreary black and white showing. And I'm sure that if I was sat down watching that film for the first time in black and white, then yeah, it would have completely baffled me too. And as a result, the public were naturally puzzled by it, and it then gave the press the chance to have a good dig at the Beatles. A colour transmission did follow on BBC Two on January the 5th, 1968, but the damage had pretty much been done by then. But I love Magical Mystery Tour for all of its daffy and goofy brilliance. It's my favourite Beatles film. My sixth comment is that the Yellow Submarine album from January 1969 really should have been an EP. And this is actually something that was given serious consideration mid-1968, I believe. And there was a thought that Across the Universe, which of course later appeared on the Let It Be album, was going to be included in this EP. Of course, we do get 4 fantastic Beatles originals on the Yellow Submarine album, but we also get Yellow Submarine, of course, and All You Need Is Love, which we'd had previously. So to fill the album out in that way, as well as side 2's orchestral scores by George Martin, it seemed like it was merely cashing in on the success of the film, which I believe it was. And I think it's fair to say that the Yellow Submarine album would be at the bottom of most fans' worst to best Beatles albums list. Comment number 7, and this one is more a what if or imagine that. In between releasing these landmark albums that we all hold in such high esteem and love so much, they were also put under great pressure to release singles and write B-sides. And over the years I've spoke to plenty of Beatles fans about this thought. Imagine if Day Tripper or We Can Work It Out, or both, were put on the Rubber Soul album. If Rain or Paperback Writer appeared on Revolver, if Strawberry Fields Forever or Penny Lane was on Sgt. Pepper. I know that George Martin was very keen for those 2 to be included on that album. These of course were standalone singles that could have easily appeared on those albums, and for me, they really would have made those albums stronger. Imagine if Rubber Soul ended with Day Tripper as opposed to Run For Your Life. Run For Your Life could have been relegated to the B-side of We Can Work It Out, for example. Now, the song Yellow Submarine should not be easily discarded. It's a hugely popular and important Beatles song, but maybe that should have been a standalone single, and Rain could easily have taken its place and fit in better with the overall sound of Revolver, in my opinion, my humble opinion. And maybe Strawberry Fields Forever could have slotted into Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band somewhere, and Penny Lane could have been the standalone single. I'm sure the boys could have knocked off a more than suitable B-side to go along with that song. Number 8, and of course I can say this with the benefit of hindsight, knowing that it was pretty much a financial disaster, but the formation of Apple. It was a great idea and a bold move, and there were some great songs and great artists signed to the label. James Taylor, Badfinger, Mary Hopkin, to name a few. And we got that goofy Zapple label and George's electronic sound album, but it was badly run and it was a mess really, and drained the band's finances, which of course led to many arguments. Which leads me very nicely on to comment number 9, and thanks to my brother Liam for bringing this one to my attention. Taking up with Alan Klein. Klein came in like a bull in a china shop and both divided and conquered, trampling over the fragile relationships within the band. As we know, Paul didn't want anything to do with Klein and eventually took the Beatles to court in 1971 to get himself free. And it turned out that Klein, as Paul suspected, was indeed a huge crook who had withheld huge sums of money from both John and George, and he later sued both for millions of dollars. When asked about Klein in an interview with John, which I think was sometime late 1973, he said, "Although I don't want to go into the details of it, let's say that possibly McCartney's suspicions were right." Yes, John, possibly, probably, most definitely. Finally, comment number 10, and my first comment was a fairly obvious one, I thought, so I'll also finish with an obvious one. There is a strong feeling that the Beatles broke up at exactly the right time, but I also think there's a stronger feeling that we would have liked one more album. For me, the Beatles were getting better with every album they made. My top 3 favourite Beatles albums would be number 3, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, number 2, The White Album, and my favourite is Abbey Road. So obviously Let It Be was released May 1970, some 8 months after Abbey Road, but initially that album was scrapped. So if the Beatles had gone into recording an album in early 1970 off of the back of Abbey Road, then, well, wow, the possibilities are endless. And if the Beatles had done that, would they have started with a clean slate, or would they have gone back to those Get Back sessions and cherry-picked some of the best songs from there? But as it goes, I'm glad we've got the Let It Be album as it is. It doesn't quite follow that upwards trajectory that I was speaking of with Sgt. Pepper's, The White Album and Abbey Road, but it's still a fine album. And if the Beatles hadn't split up, then we certainly wouldn't have had McCartney's debut, All Things Must Pass, John Lennon's Plastic Ono Band, and even Bukus of Blues by Ringo, which I'm very fond of. So there you go, 10 points made, some regrets, some wishes from the Beatles' magnificent career. And these were merely just some thoughts that I had. I don't wish to sound like I'm trying to rewrite history in any way. But as I say, I think it's an interesting topic and I'd love to know what you think, so please leave any thoughts and comments down below. And as always, thank you so much for stopping by and watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I'll see you for my next video sometime soon. Bye for now.